Namaskar and welcome to a special episode of the Indologia podcast. Ramnavmi is a few days away, and for obvious reasons, it is a bit more special this year. So I thought I'll do a special episode telling the stories of Sri Ram. So this episode is titled Ramayana in 5 Stories. Narad was a bull among sages, devoted to austerities and self-studying. He was an ascetic and supreme among those who were eloquent. Valmiki asked him, "Right now, who in this world is valorous and possesses all the qualities? Who knows about dharma? Who is truthful in his words and firm in his vows? Who also possesses good conduct and is engaged in the welfare of all creatures? Who is also learned and capable? Who has control over his own self and has conquered anger? Who is radiant and devoid of jealousy? When his anger is aroused in battle, whom are even the gods scared of? I wish to hear about all this. My curiosity is great. O great sage, you are the person who is capable of knowing about this kind of man." Narad knew about the 3 worlds. On hearing these words, he was delighted. He invited Valmiki to listen and said, "O sage, the many qualities you have recounted are extremely rare. Using my intelligence, I will tell you about such a man. I have heard about him. He was born in the lineage of Ikshvaku, and he is known to people as Ram. He is self-controlled in his soul and immensely valorous. He is radiant, possesses fortitude, is intelligent and follows good policy. He is eloquent and handsome. He is a destroyer of enemies. He possesses broad shoulders and mighty arms. His chest is broad and his bow is huge. He is a subjugator of enemies. He is prosperous and possesses all the auspicious qualities. He knows about dharma. He is firm in adhering to the truth and is devoted to the welfare of the subjects. He is famous and full of learning. He is pure, controlled, and has restrained himself. He is a protector of the world of the living and is also a protector of dharma. He knows the truth about the Vedas and is skilled in Dhanurved. He is resplendent and knows the truth about all the sacred texts. He is virtuous and is loved by all the people. Just as all rivers head towards the ocean, all virtuous people approach him. He is noble and impartial towards everyone. In his gravity, he is like the ocean. In his patience, he is like the Himalayas. He is like Vishnu in valor. In his rage, he is like the fire of destruction. In generosity, he is like the Lord of riches. Ram possesses such qualities, and truth is his valor. He is the eldest and possesses the best of qualities. He is Dashrath's beloved son. He is like dharma in truthfulness. Part 2. The Bow. When it was a sparkling morning, King Janak performed the morning rituals and invited the great-souled Vishwamitra and Raghav. He then spoke, "O illustrious one, O unblemished one, welcome. What can I do for you, O illustrious one? Command me. I am ready to be commanded by you." Rishi Vishwamitra, eloquent in the use of words, replied, "These 2 are the sons of Dashrath. They are Kshatriyas and are famous in the worlds. They wish to see the supreme bow that is in your possession. If they can see the bow, the wishes of these 2 princes will be satisfied." Thus addressed, Janak replied to the great sage, "There was a king famous by the name of Devrat, and he was the 6th in line from Nimi. The illustrious and the great-souled one left it in his hands in trust. Earlier, at the time of the destruction of Daksha's sacrifice, the valiant Rudra angrily raised the bow and playfully spoke to the gods. 'O gods, I desire a share of the sacrifice, but you did not think of a share for me. Therefore, I will sever your heads with this extremely revered bow.' At this, all the gods were distressed. They sought the favors of the Lord of the gods. Happy, he bestowed his favors on those great-souled ones. After this, the great-souled god of the gods handed over this gem of a bow in trust to our ancestor. Later, I was plowing and purifying my field. From the field, my upraised plow brought up the one who has become famous by the name of Sita. Having been raised from the surface of the ground, she was raised as my daughter. I have not bestowed my daughter on any of the kings who have come. I will bestow my daughter through the mode of Virashulk, or bull among sages. That is the reason all these kings assembled here. They arrived in Mithila to test their valor. Their valor was to be tested by their ability to raise the bow. However, none of them were able to grasp the bow or raise it. I got to know that those valiant ones possess little valor. I therefore refused all those kings. At this, the kings were extremely enraged. Since their valor was being doubted, all of them laid siege to Mithila. They thought that they had been slighted. Therefore, prey to great rage, they oppressed the city of Mithila. After an entire year passed, everything began to suffer and the supplies were exhausted. That is the reason I became extremely miserable. After this, I pleased the large number of gods through my austerities. Extremely pleased, the gods gave me armies with 4 kinds of forces. Through these, those evil-acting and cowardly kings who doubted my valor were routed and driven away in different directions. I will show that extremely radiant bow to Ram and Lakshman too, O sage. If Ram is capable of stringing that bow, I will bestow my daughter Sita on Dashrath's son. Having heard Janak's words, the great sage Vishwamitra told the king, "Show Ram the bow." At this, King Janak instructed his advisors, "Bring the divine bow, decorated with fragrances and garlands." Commanded by Janak, the advisors entered the city. They were 5,000 tall and great-souled men. Together, they somehow managed to tug it along on a casket with 8 wheels. Having brought the iron casket with the bow, the ministers informed the king, "O king, this is the supreme bow that is worshipped by all the kings, O lord of Mithila. This is what you wished to be shown." Hearing these words, the king joined his hands in salutation and addressed the great-souled Vishwamitra. "O Brahman, this is the supreme bow, worshipped by those of the Janak lineage. Extremely valiant kings have not been able to use it to take aim, nor have the large number of gods, asuras, rakshasas, gandharvas, the best of yakshas, kinnaras, or the giant serpents. How can men raise the bow, string it, affix an arrow and take aim with it? O bull among sages, O immensely fortunate one, the best among bows has been brought so that it can be shown to the 2 princes." Vishwamitra, with dharma in his soul, heard Janak's words. He told Raghav, "O Ram, O son, behold the bow." Hearing the Maharishi's words, Ram opened the casket where the bow was kept. He saw the bow and said, "O Brahman, I wish to touch this supreme bow with my hands. I want to try to raise it and take aim with it." The king and the sage said, "Go ahead." Hearing the sage's words, he playfully grasped the bow at the middle. While many thousands of men looked on, the descendant of the Raghu lineage, with dharma in his soul, playfully strung the bow. The valiant one, immensely illustrious and best among men, strung the bowstring and took aim. The bow snapped at the middle. A great sound arose, like the roar of a storm. It was as if there was an extremely giant earthquake that made the mountains shatter. Confounded by that sound, all the men, with the exception of the supreme among sages, the king and the 2 Raghavs, fell down unconscious. When the men regained their senses, the king joined his hands in salutation and spoke these words to the bull among sages, who was eloquent with words. "O illustrious one, I have witnessed the valor of Ram, Dashrath's son. This is extremely wonderful and unthinkable. This is something that has not even been talked about. If Sita gets Ram as her husband, my daughter will bring fame to the lineage of the Janaks. My daughter Sita is worth many of my lives, and it is my view that she should be bestowed to Ram. O Brahman, with your permission, let my ministers quickly go. O Kaushik, O fortunate one, let them go to Ayodhya on chariots. With diligent words, let them bring the king Dashrath to my city. Let them tell him everything and about the bestowal. With affectionate words, they will bring the king extremely swiftly." When Kaushik agreed to this, the king addressed his ministers. The one with dharma in his soul commanded them and sent them to Ayodhya. Part 3. The Exile. The king was bereft of his senses. With his wives he heard Ram's words and saw that he was attired in a sage's garments. Tormented by grief, he was incapable of looking towards Ram. Distressed in his mind, though miserable, the great king regained his senses for a moment and lamented, "I think that in the past I must have separated several from their children. I must have caused injury to creatures. That is the reason I am now confronted with this. Until the time arrives, life is not separated from the body. Despite being afflicted by Kaikeyi, I am not faced with death. I see my son stationed before me and he is like a fire. However, abandoning his delicate garments, my son is clad in the garb of an ascetic. Indeed, it is because of Kaikeyi's deeds alone that all these people are suffering. Driven by selfish motives, she has brought about this act of deceit." These are the words he spoke, his eyes overflowing with tears. Afflicted by grief, he was incapable of saying anything other than Ram, Ram, Ram. After an instant, the great king regained his senses. His eyes overflowing with tears, he addressed Sumantra in these words, "Arrange a chariot that can be driven and yoke it to excellent steeds. Take this extremely fortunate one from here, from the boundaries of the habitation. A brave and virtuous person is being exiled to the forest by his father and his mother." Following the king's command, Sumantra, swift in his valor, yoked an ornamented chariot with horses and brought it there, a chariot decorated in gold for the prince. The king quickly summoned the person who was in charge of accumulating riches and said, "Remembering the number of years that has to be spent, quickly bring expensive garments and excellent ornaments for Vaidehi." Thus addressed, he went to the treasury. He quickly brought everything and offered it to Sita. Vaidehi, born in a noble lineage, was about to leave for the forest. Adorned in those excellent ornaments, Vaidehi made the residence look radiant. She was like the sun with rays, rising at the right time and illuminating the sky with its resplendence. Her mother-in-law engulfed her in her arms and spoke these words, "In this world, even though they are respected and loved, false women cease to honor their husbands when they face hardships. Do not disrespect my son who is being exiled. Though he possesses riches, he is poor now. However, he is still your divinity." Sita understood the words spoken, full of dharma and arth. She joined her hands in salutation and addressed her mother-in-law, who stood in front of her. "O noble one, I will do everything that you have instructed me. I know how I should conduct myself towards my husband. I am not capable of deviating from dharma, just as the moon cannot be separated from its radiance. Without cords, the veena doesn't make a sound. Without wheels, a chariot does not move. Even if she has 100 sons, a woman doesn't obtain happiness without her husband. A father gives a limited amount. What a mother and a son give are also limited. What a husband gives is unlimited. I have been instructed by the best, those who are supreme upholders of dharma." Sita's words penetrated Kaushalya's heart, and on hearing them, the one who was pure of heart suddenly released tears, because they were a source of both misery and joy. Ram was supreme in knowledge of dharma. He joined his hands and approached his own mother. He spoke these words, "O mother, you should not be sad. Look towards my father. The period of dwelling in the forest will soon be over. The period of 14 years will pass, as if you are sleeping, You will see me return here, surrounded by well-wishers. He then glanced at his 350 mothers. In a similar way, joining his hands in salutation, Dashrath's son then spoke similar words, full of dharma and arth, to those distressed mothers too. While I resided here with you, if I said anything harsh, or if I did anything in ignorance, please pardon me. Now I seek my leave from all of you. As Raghav spoke in this way, the sounds of lamentations arose from the king's wives. In former times, Dashrath's residence used to resound with the sound of tambourines and drums. But there was now the sound of extremely miserable wails and lamentations. The miserable Ram, Sita and Lakshman joined their hands in salutation. Having taken his leave, Raghav, who knew about dharma, with Sita, bowed down before his mother, who was confounded by grief. Lakshman followed his brother and bowed down before Kaushalya. He next touched the feet of his mother Sumitra, who was weeping. She addressed him, "Because you are devoted to your well-wisher, I have permitted you to reside in the forest, O son. Do not fail to take care of Ram, your brother who is leaving for the forest. O unblemished one, whether it is prosperity or adversity, he is your refuge. In this world, that is the dharma of the virtuous, being obedient to an elder. This is the eternal appropriate behavior for this lineage. Donations, consecration for sacrifices, and giving up one's body in battles. I know Ram to be like Dashrath. Know Janak's daughter to be like me. Know the forest to be Ayodhya. O son, depart cheerfully." Knowledgeable about humility, Sumantra joined his hands in salutation and humbly spoke to Ram. "O fortunate one, O immensely illustrious one, ascend the chariot. O Ram, I will quickly take you to whichever place you tell me to. You will have to reside in the forest for 14 years, as has been instructed by the queen. That period has now commenced." Children and aged rushed towards Ram, like a person whose suffering in the summer rushes towards water. Their long and anxious faces could be seen at the rear and towards the sides. All of them were extremely miserable, and their faces were overflowing with tears. They said, "O Sut, hold back the reins of the horses and proceed slowly. We wish to see Ram's face, which will become extremely difficult for us to behold. There is no doubt that Ram's mother's heart is indeed made of iron. It has not got shattered despite her son, who is like a god, leaving for the forest." King Dashrath used to be handsome, but he seemed shrunken, like the full moon when it has been enveloped in an eclipse. As he glanced back, Ram saw his father and mother following along the path, distressed and not in control of their senses. He was bound by dharma and could not look at them directly. Part 4. Lanka. The immensely strong one safely crossed the insurmountable ocean. He saw Lanka, located on the summit of Trikut. Hanumat, excellent in his valor, had crossed 100 yojanas without taking a breath or suffering from any exhaustion. Thus, the best among valiant ones and supreme among the Vanars powerfully crossed the great ocean and went to Lanka. From the summit of the mountain, the son of the wind god saw forests, groves, and Lanka. The trees were full of birds, with the tops bent down because of the wind. There were lotuses and lilies in the water bodies. These were surrounded by many kinds of trees, filled everywhere with blossoming flowers. Hanumat had reached prosperous Lanka, ruled over by Ravan. It was adorned with moats that was full of lotuses and lilies. Because Sita had been abducted, it was protected well by Ravan. On every side, Rakshasas with fierce bows roamed around. The great city was surrounded by golden and beautiful ramparts. There were hundreds of mansions decorated with garlands of flags and pennants. The gates were golden and divine, decorated with the marks of creepers. Hanumat saw Lanka, and it was like a city of the gods in heaven, with its white residences, Lanka was located on the summit of the mountain. It was like a handsome city in the sky and had been constructed by Vishwakarma. In earlier times, it used to be ruled over by Kuber. Now it was protected by terrible Rakshasas, who were like venomous serpents inside a cave. They were brave and possessed many fangs, with spears and lances in their hands. Having reached the northern gate, Hanumat started to think. It was like the summit of Kailash, like a painting etched out in the sky. He thought about the terrible enemy, Ravan. Even if the Vanas come here, they will not be successful. Even the gods will find it impossible to conquer Lanka in a battle. Protected by Ravan, Lanka is impenetrable and fortified. Even if the mighty armed Raghav reaches it, what will he do? There seems to be no prospect of approaching the Rakshasas and using conciliation. I will think about this after I have found out whether Vaidehi is alive or not. Let me first see Janak's daughter. Searching for Maithili, he looked around. He looked at everything that was on the ground. There were thousands of Ashoka trees there. It was divine and beautiful, surrounded by prosperity. Not very far from there, in Ashokvan, the bull among Vanars saw a lofty place of worship. It was as white as Kailash, and thousands of pillars stood in its center. The stairs were made out of coral, and the sacrificial altars were made out of molten gold. It blazed in its prosperity, and its end could not be seen with the eyes. Sparkling and tall, it seemed to etch out a painting in the sky. He then saw her, like the trace of the pure crescent moon at the beginning of Shukla Paksh. She was attired in a soiled garment and was surrounded by Rakshasis. She was distressed and lean from fasting. She was like the flame of the fire when it had been enveloped in a net of smoke. She was like a lotus pond covered in mud and without lotuses in it. The ascetic one was faded and ashamed, tormented by grief. Her miserable face was full of tears. The fasting had made her emaciated. She was like a doe separated from her own kin and surrounded by a pack of dogs. With eyes like those of a helpless fawn, she glanced around here and there. Her face was cheerless, and her eyelashes, with sidelong glances, were filled with tears. With great sorrow, Hanumat accepted that this person without ornaments, like words that have meaning but are without polish, was indeed Sita. This one with the golden complexion is Ram's beloved queen. She has not been destroyed, nor has she been destroyed in his mind. She is the one because of whom Ram has been tormented. This queen's mind is vested in him, and his is vested in her. It is because of her that the one with dharma in his soul is able to sustain his life even for an instant. Thus seeing Sita, the son of the wind god was delighted. Mentally, he praised Sri Ram. Part 5. The End of Evil. Seeing that the intelligent Ram was enraged, all the beings were terrified, and the earth trembled. The mountains with the lions and tigers quaked, the trees swayed. The ocean, the lord of the rivers, was agitated. Dense clouds thundered in the sky in harsh tones. Evil portents roared and manifested themselves in all the directions. On seeing that Ram was greatly angry, there were terrible omens. All the beings were terrified, and Ravan was scared. The gods astride their vimanas, the Gandharvas, the giant serpents, the rishis, the danavas, the daityas, and the eagles roaming around in the sky witnessed the battle, which was like that of the world getting destroyed. Using many kinds of terrible weapons, those two brave ones fought against each other. All the gods and the asuras assembled in personified forms to witness the great encounter. The asuras present said, "Victory to Dashagriva." The gods replied, "Victory to Ram." The soldiers of the Rakshasas and the large army of the Vanars held many weapons in their hands. But as they witnessed the battle, their minds were filled with amazement, and they forgot to fight each other. The eyes of Ravan's Rakshasas and Raghav's Vanars were filled with amazement. The soldiers were like paintings. Raghav and Ravan saw those portents. They were firm in their intolerance and made up their minds to fight fearlessly. Kakusht was sure he would win. Ravan was certain he would die. They displayed their fortitude and all their spirit in that battle. All the gods, the Gandharvas, the Siddhas, the supreme rishis, the Kinnars, and the giant serpents were worried. They said, "May the worlds remain till eternity. In this battle may Raghav be victorious over Ravan, the lord of the Rakshasas." The mighty armed, extender of the deeds of the Raghu lineage, became angry. Ram affixed a sure arrow that was like virulent poison to his bow. Ravan's handsome head blazed with its earrings. While the three worlds looked on, he severed the head and it fell down on the ground. However, Ravan sprouted another head that was exactly similar. Ram, who was swift in action, became angry. Acting with a quick hand, he affixed an arrow and severed the second head of Ravan's. However, no sooner was this head severed that another one was seen. Ram used arrows that were like the Vajra to sever this too. In this way, 100 heads that were equally radiant were severed. No signs were seen about Ravan's end or his life being over. Matali, charioteer of Indradev himself, reminded Raghav, "O brave one, why are you acting as if you don't know what is to be done? O Lord, to kill him, use the grandfather's weapon. The time for his destruction, which the gods spoke about, has come now." Ram was reminded by Matali's words. He seized a blazing arrow that sighed like a serpent. The wind was in its feathers, the fire and the sun were in its points. Its body was made out of space. Its energy had been fashioned out of all the elements, and it was like the sun in its radiance. It could shatter hordes of men, elephants, and horses. It could shatter gates, barricades, and mountains. It emitted a loud roar and was terrible and terrified everyone. The immensely strong Ram chanted mantras over this great arrow, following the rites mentioned in the Vedas. The powerful one affixed it to his bow. Extremely angry, he stretched his terrible bow and attentively shot this arrow, which could shatter the inner organs, towards Ravan. It was as invincible as the Vajra and was released from an arm that was as strong as the Vajra. It was as irresistible as death and descended on Ravan's chest and shattered the evil-souled Ravan's heart. It took away Ravan's life and, smeared with blood, penetrated the ground. Having killed Ravan, the arrow had a form that was wet with blood. Having performed its task, it quietly returned to the quiver. Ravan's breath of life was separated from his body, and he fell down. The bows and arrows also fell from his hand. On seeing that Ravan had fallen down on the ground, the remaining roamers in the night were terrified by fear. With their protector killed, they fled in different directions. They were afflicted and routed by the Vanars. Delighted, the Vanars roared. They proclaimed Raghav's victory and Ravan's death. Praises of Raghav were heard in the sky. The great-souled gods uttered words of acclaim. At the terrible Ravan, who caused fear to all the worlds, being killed, the gods were filled with great joy. And with this, we come to the end of this episode. I hope you enjoyed these stories from the Ramayana. And if you did, then please do not forget to give this podcast a good rating on Apple, Spotify, or whichever platform you're listening to this on. You should also follow me on the social medias. The name is Indologia, Indologia. You can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, WhatsApp, Telegram, YouTube. I'm all over the place. I wish you all a very happy Ramnavmi. Until the next time I see you, Jai Shri Ram.